The Zenari planet was beautiful. 3 suns hung in the sky, casting golden light across crystal cities that grew from the ground like flowers. For thousands of years the Zenari had lived in peace. They built art. They studied science. They had never fought a war. Then everything changed in one moment. The alarm in the command center started screaming. It was a sound nobody had heard in living memory. High Coordinator Mira was in a meeting about farming when the doors burst open. A young officer, breathing hard, told her to come quick. She ran to the main control room. Screens flashed with red warnings. One message kept repeating, broken and desperate: Colony 7 calling. Colony 7 calling. We're under attack. Please, anyone who hears this, we need help. We need. The message cut off. Static filled the speakers. Mira felt ice in her stomach. Colony 7 was home to 5,000 people. Scientists, teachers, families with children. It was the most remote Zenari settlement, built on a planet far from the capital. What happened? She demanded. A technician named River looked up, her eyes wide with fear. We received the distress signal 15 minutes ago. Since then, nothing. No more transmissions. The colony's communication array is offline. We can't reach them. Another officer, an older man named David, spoke up. We're picking up energy signatures near Colony 7. Massive energy signatures. Weapons fire. Explosions. Mira sank into the main chair. Around her, the other coordinators whispered nervously. The Zenari had councils, not military leaders. They had teachers, not soldiers. Can we send help? Someone asked hopefully. David shook his head. Our fastest ships will take 2 days to reach Colony 7. By then. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The door opened again and an elderly coordinator walked in. His name was Thorn and he had been alive for 300 years. His skin, usually a pale blue, had turned almost white. The Vorthak, he said quietly. It's the Vorthak, isn't it? Everyone knew that name. The Vorthak were conquerors. They traveled from world to world, destroying civilizations, enslaving people, taking everything they wanted. 43 species had fallen to them in the last 1,000 years. Entire worlds had been erased. The Zenari had hoped the Vorthak would never find them. They were peaceful. They had nothing the Vorthak wanted. They weren't military targets. Apparently that didn't matter. We need to do something, said Mira. Now. We can't just sit here and let them destroy Colony 7. What can we do? River asked, her voice shaking. We have no weapons. We have no army. Our fastest warships are research vessels. They have shields but no weapons. It was true. The Zenari had spent 3,000 years choosing peace. They had no military industry. No soldiers. No weapons. They had forgotten how to fight. Thorn moved closer to Mira. He looked ancient now, his face lined with worry. There is one option, he said quietly. But we would have to use the emergency protocol. Everyone went silent. The emergency protocol was a legend. It was something from the oldest records, from times when the galaxy was more dangerous. From times before peace. No, said David immediately. Absolutely not. We agreed never to use that protocol. We made a treaty. The treaty is being broken as we speak, Thorn replied. Colony 7 is dying. We need help. Mira turned to him. What are you talking about? What emergency protocol? Thorn took a deep breath. 400 years ago the galaxy was very different. There was a species called humans. They came from a planet called Earth. They were dangerous. Very dangerous. They fought constantly. They conquered. They destroyed. They were predators in a way no other species was. He paused, looking at old images on a screen. The Galactic Assembly decided that humanity was too dangerous to be free. They were too violent, too unpredictable. So the Assembly made a deal with the humans. They gave humanity a huge section of space, 100 star systems, and told them they could do whatever they wanted there. But they could never leave. Never expand beyond their border. They were basically locked away. Locked away by who? Asked River. By everyone, Thorn said. The Assembly put up barriers. Military blockades. Technology blocks. For 400 years, humans have been contained in their own space. The rest of the galaxy was forbidden from entering. Humans were forbidden from leaving. It was the largest quarantine in galactic history. David still looked angry. And what does this have to do with our situation? Thorn pointed to an old device on a shelf in the corner of the room. It was ancient, covered in dust. Nobody had touched it in centuries. Before the quarantine, the Assembly gave certain species an insurance policy. A beacon. If a species was about to be destroyed, if there was no other hope, they could activate the beacon. And one species, the species they feared most, they were allowed to answer. Mira understood. The humans? Yes, Thorne said. If any species activated the beacon, humanity would be allowed to respond. They would be permitted to leave their quarantine zone. To come help. To fight. Why would we want that? Asked River. You said they were monsters. Because, Thorne said slowly, sometimes you need a monster to fight another monster. The room was completely silent. Mira looked at the ancient beacon. It seemed so small and harmless. Just an old piece of technology. But if Thorne was right, activating it would change everything. David was shaking his head. This is insane. We don't know what will happen. The humans might come and decide to conquer us instead of helping us. We might free something we can't control. 5,000 people are dying right now, Mira said quietly. In Colony 7. Children. Families. They're dying and we can't reach them in time. If we don't do something, the Vorthack will destroy everything. She looked at Thorne. How do I activate it? Are you sure? He asked. Mira thought of the colony. She thought of families in their homes facing impossible odds. She thought of children who had done nothing wrong, caught in a war they didn't start. We have no choice, she said. She walked to the ancient beacon and pressed her hand against it. The device hummed. A soft blue light appeared on its surface. For a moment nothing happened. Then the light faded. The beacon went cold. It's done, Mira whispered. She didn't know what she had just done. She didn't know that somewhere across the galaxy, in a section of space most civilizations pretended didn't exist, alarms were starting to sound. She didn't know that, for the first time in 400 years, humanity was waking up. She didn't know that she had just unleashed something the galaxy had been terrified of for centuries. She didn't know that nothing would ever be the same. The military base on Earth was hidden deep underground. It had been built 400 years ago, right after humanity was locked away. The base was called the Den, and it was where humanity's best soldiers lived and trained. Commander Jake Morrison was sleeping in his quarters when everything changed. The alarm started with a low vibration that shook the entire building. Then came the sound, a wail that meant only one thing. A signal from outside the quarantine zone. Jake's eyes opened immediately. He was used to sleeping lightly. Soldiers always were. He was out of bed before the alarm had finished its first cycle. He moved on pure instinct. Uniform on in seconds. Boots laced tight. Jacket fastened. He was out of his room and running toward the war room before most people would have even woken up. The corridors were already filling with soldiers. Hundreds of them. They moved like they'd been waiting for this moment their entire lives. Because they had been. Jake pushed through the doors into the war room. The main screens were alive with information. Every display showed the same thing. A message from the Zenari. Distress signal. Colony under attack. Request for help. Jake read it once. Then again. His face broke into a smile. Not a friendly smile. A hunter's smile. Get me Captain Robert, he said to the nearest officer. The young soldier didn't ask questions. He just moved. That was the beauty of a military that had been training for 400 years with nothing to do but prepare. They had perfected the art of following orders quickly and without hesitation. Robert appeared within minutes. He was younger than Jake, maybe 40 years old. He had bright red hair and the kind of calm expression that told you he'd seen serious situations before. Captain Robert ran the weapons division. I need the fleet ready, Jake said. All ships. All weapons. Full combat readiness. Robert didn't blink. How long? As fast as possible. Robert nodded and left. Jake knew the fleet would be ready. They trained for this every single day. For 400 years the soldiers on Earth had done one thing. Trained. Trained to fight. Trained to win. Trained for a moment that almost never came. Until today. Jake moved to the main communication console. Around him officers were already working. They weren't panicked. They were excited. This was what they had been born to do. He opened a channel to the entire base. His voice boomed through every speaker, reaching thousands of soldiers. Attention all units. This is Commander Morrison. The quarantine is over. We have received an emergency signal from outside our territory. A peaceful species is under attack. We are going to help them. The base erupted in cheers. Jake continued, all combat personnel report to your stations. All pilots to the flight deck. All weapons officers to your posts. We move out in 2 hours. And I want to be clear about one thing, we don't go to talk. We don't go to negotiate. We go to win. He paused. And we always win. Down in the docking bay, Captain Robert was already at work. The bay was huge, a massive underground hangar that could fit 100 ships. For 400 years, these ships had sat here. Maintained, updated, ready, but never used. Now they were coming alive. Soldiers in orange suits were running everywhere. They checked fuel lines. They loaded ammunition. They ran systems tests on weapons that hadn't been fired in centuries. But everyone knew how to do this. It was all muscle memory. All training. One of Robert's best pilots was a woman named Jessica. She was standing in front of a fighter jet, running her hands over it like it was an old friend. "We're really doing this?" she asked when Robert walked past. "We're really doing this," he confirmed. Jessica grinned. 400 years my family has been waiting for this. My great-great-great-grandmother fought in the border wars. She always said humanity would be needed again. Well, she was right, Robert said. "Get your bird ready. We launch in 90 minutes. Jessica was already moving, climbing into her fighter. Around the docking bay, 50 other pilots were doing the same thing. 50 fighters. 50 of the best pilots Earth had ever produced. The main hangar doors began to open. Cold air flooded in from the surface. For the first time in 400 years, these ships would taste the sky. On the flagship, a massive destroyer called the Predator, Jake stood on the bridge. The walls around him were covered with screens. Each screen showed a different ship in his fleet. Each captain saluted him as they came online. 20 destroyers. 15 cruisers. 15 fighter squadrons. Support ships. Medical ships. Supply ships. It was the most powerful military force Earth had launched since the quarantine began. And it was only a fraction of what they could have sent. The Earth Defense Force had thousands of ships in orbit, hidden behind camouflage technology so advanced that no other species even knew they existed. But Jake didn't need thousands of ships. Not for this. 50 ships was plenty. He sat in the command chair, a massive thing of steel and leather that had been waiting for 400 years for a commander to use it. The chair hummed with power. Holographic displays appeared around him, showing him everything happening in the fleet. All ships reporting ready, a communications officer told him. All weapons armed. All crews at battle stations. "How long until we can jump to fold space?" Jake asked. 15 minutes, the officer replied. Jake nodded. Fold space was dangerous. It let you travel across the galaxy in minutes instead of years. But humanity hadn't used fold space in 400 years. The technology had improved a lot since then. They'd had nothing but time to work on it. He opened a channel to all ships in the fleet. "This is Commander Morrison. I want every crew to hear what I'm about to say." The bridge went quiet. Thousands of soldiers across 50 ships were listening. 400 years ago, our people were locked away. They said we were too dangerous, too violent, too unpredictable. They put us in a cage and threw away the key. They told us we could never leave, never expand, never be free. Jake's voice was calm, professional. But there was something underneath it. Something ancient and dangerous. Today that changes. Today we show this galaxy what we really are. We don't come as conquerors. We come as protectors. There's a peaceful species out there being attacked by monsters. We're going to stop it. He leaned forward. Remember your training. Remember everything we've prepared for. Remember that we are the apex predators of this galaxy. Not because we're cruel. Not because we're evil. But because we never stop. We never give up. We never surrender. He paused. When we jump to fold space, we jump as hunters. When we arrive as death. And when those attackers see us coming, they're going to understand why the galaxy locked humanity away. The bridge was completely silent. Then someone started clapping. Just one person at first. Then another. Then the entire bridge crew was clapping. On every screen, soldiers and other ships were doing the same thing. "All ships," Jake commanded, "prepare for fold space jump in 10 minutes. Weapons hot. Shields ready. Let's go hunt." The Predator began to move. All around it, other ships moved into formation. Perfect alignment. Perfect spacing. 50 ships moving as one organism. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and smaller. For the first time in 400 years, humanity was leaving the quarantine zone. And nobody in the galaxy was ready for what was coming. Commander Krax of the Vortak Empire was not worried. He had conquered 43 worlds. He had destroyed entire civilizations. He had faced stronger armies than this. The Zenari were nothing. They had 100 ships. Old ships, slow ships, ships built for science and exploration, not for war. The Vortak had 200 warships, each one built for battle. each one crewed by warriors who had spent their lives fighting. This was going to be easy. Krax sat in his command chair on the flagship, a massive destroyer called the Fong. Around him, his officers worked at their stations. On the main screen, the Zenari colony planet hung like a jewel. Already, Vortak ground forces were landing. Already, cities were burning. How long until we crushed their remaining defenses? Krax asked. One of his officers, a scarred warrior named Vex, looked up. 2 hours, Commander. Maybe less. They have no real military. They're running, hiding. We've already destroyed half their communication towers. Krax made a sound that was almost like laughter. The Vortak were reptilian creatures, tall and muscular, with scales that ranged from dark green to black. They had no emotions like kindness or mercy. They understood only strength and weakness. And the Zenari were weak. Bring me their leader, Krax commanded. When they surrender, I want to look them in the eye and watch them understand that resistance was pointless. Yes, Commander, Vex replied. Everything was proceeding perfectly. Krax had destroyed 43 civilizations this way. It was always the same pattern. Find a weak species. Overwhelm. Conquer. Move on to the next target. He was reaching for a drink when his sensor officer suddenly sat up straight. Commander. New contacts. What? Krax turned to look at the scanner. Energy signatures. Multiple ships. They're dropping out of fold space. There. The officer's voice died. On every screen, new ships appeared. 50 of them. They came out of fold space in perfect formation, moving like one organism. Their hulls were dark and angular. No beauty. No elegance. Just pure, brutal functionality. And their weapons were already firing. The first volley hit before Krax could even give an order. It was impossible. No species should be able to coordinate that fast, should be able to target that accurately. But the human ships did. The first human volley hit 20 Vortak ships. Not damaged them. Destroyed them. The Vortak warships simply exploded. Shields overwhelmed. Hulls torn apart. Thousands of warriors vaporized in nuclear fire. Return fire. Krax screamed. Return fire now. The Vortak fleet erupted in chaos. Alarms screamed through every ship. Warriors scrambled to their battle stations. Weapons officers desperately tried to lock onto targets. But by the time the Vortak fired, the human ships were already gone. They had scattered like birds, spreading out across space. The Vortak weapons blazed through empty space, hitting nothing. The human ships regrouped with impossible speed and fired again. This time they destroyed 15 more Vortak vessels. Krax watched his beautiful fleet, the fleet he had spent 10 years building, being torn apart like paper. It didn't make sense. The Vortak had superior numbers. They had better armor. They had more firepower. But the human ships moved like they could see the future. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Krax commanded. Spread out. Don't let them concentrate fire. Commander, there, Vex started, but another explosion cut him off. One of the Vortak cruisers near the flagship had taken a direct hit. It split in half, trailing fire and debris. Krax's communications officer spoke up, his voice shaking. We're receiving a transmission. The human flagship is hailing us. Ignore it. Keep firing. But the message came through anyway. A human voice, calm and cold. This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet. You are attacking a species under our protection. Stand down your weapons immediately or be destroyed. Krax bared his teeth. It was a threat display, something all Vortak understood. But these humans wouldn't understand that. These humans wouldn't. Attack them, Krax snarled. All ships. Concentrate fire on their flagship. Destroy it. The Vortak fleet turned and unleashed everything they had at once. Hundreds of weapons fired simultaneously. The space between the fleets filled with energy and fire and death. And the human flagship just disappeared. It moved so fast that it seemed to teleport. The Vortak weapons passed through empty space while the human ship reappeared behind them, weapons firing. Then something happened that changed everything. Over the communication system, Jake Morrison's voice came back. All units, engage persistence protocol. Hunt them down. I want every damaged ship found and destroyed. I want every fleeing vessel pursued to the edge of space. These monsters need to understand what real predators look like. The human ships stopped fighting like a military fleet. They started hunting like wolves. When a Vortak destroyer tried to run, 3 human fighters chased it. The destroyer was bigger, slower, more heavily armored. But the human pilots were relentless. They fired at its engines, crippling it. Then they destroyed it. When a damaged Vortak cruiser tried to limp away, a human destroyer was already there, cutting off its escape route. The human ship rammed it, and the Vortak vessel exploded. Krax watched his fleet being systematically hunted. It was like watching ants being stepped on. The Vortak were so much bigger, so much stronger. But the humans were something else. They didn't fight to win. They fought to dominate. They didn't show mercy. They showed hunger. A young officer named Tix looked at Krax. "Commander, should we?" "Shut up." Krax roared. "All ships jump to fold space. Get out of here." But the human ships were faster. Before the Vortak could escape, more human vessels appeared, blocking every exit route. The humans had them surrounded. Trapped. The slaughter continued through the night. By dawn, the Vortak fleet was destroyed. Of the 200 ships that had come to conquer this peaceful world, only 50 remained. Half of those were damaged beyond repair. The rest were running in terror. Krax sat in his command chair and watched his empire die. The Zenari were supposed to be easy. One day of fighting. Then moving on to the next conquest. Instead, they had unleashed something terrible. Something that had been waiting in a cage for 400 years. Vex approached the commander slowly. His scales, usually a dark green, had gone pale with fear. What were those things? Krax didn't answer. He didn't know. On the main screen, the last surviving Vortak ships were jumping to fold space, running as fast as they could. Behind them, the human fleet held position. They weren't chasing. They didn't need to. They had already won. Over the communication system, Jake Morrison's voice came one more time. "This is Earth Defense Fleet. Your conquest is over. You will leave this system and never return. Any Vortak vessel that attempts to re-enter this space will be destroyed without warning. Consider yourselves warned." Then silence. Krax finally understood. The Zenari hadn't defeated the Vortak. They had called for something worse. Something that made the Vortak look like prey animals. As his ship jumped to fold space, Krax made a decision. He would go home. He would tell his people what had happened. He would warn them. Because the galaxy had just made a terrible mistake. They had let the monsters out of their cage. And the monsters were hungry. Krax had been a commander for 30 years. He had faced death many times. But he had never faced it like this. They brought him in chains. Not because he was dangerous, though he was, but because it was protocol. Humans followed rules even when they didn't have to. Even when nobody would judge them if they didn't. He was led through the corridors of the human flagship. Around him, human soldiers stood guard. They weren't cruel. They didn't spit on him or hit him. They just watched him with calm, patient eyes. That was somehow worse. The detention block led to a command area. The soldiers escorted him into a large room with a viewport that looked out at space. The Zenari planet hung below them like a blue marble. Commander Jake Morrison was standing at the viewport. He was smaller than Krax expected. Humans were smaller than most species. This one was barely 1.8 meters tall. He had dark hair and skin the color of light wood. But when he turned around, Krax understood why this small creature had destroyed a fleet of 200 ships. Jake's eyes were ancient. Not kind. Not cruel. Just old. Like he had seen too much. Like he understood things that other creatures didn't. "Commander Krax," Jake said. Not a greeting. Just a statement. "I am prepared to die with honor," Krax said. It wasn't bravado. It was truth. He expected execution. Among the Vortak, that was what happened to defeated commanders. Jake nodded slowly. He walked around Krax, studying him like a scientist studying an interesting specimen. Then he sat down in a chair and gestured for Krax to sit as well. "You expected to die," Jake said. "Not a question." "Yes. That's what your culture teaches you, isn't it? That defeat means death. That mercy is weakness." Krax didn't answer. But his silence was agreement. Jake leaned back in his chair. "Do you know what I could do?" Krax waited. "I could eliminate your entire species," Jake said calmly, like he was discussing the weather. "We've done the mathematics. We have the technology. The strategic knowledge. We could hunt the Vortak to extinction in 30 years. Maybe less." Krax's heart pounded in his chest. It was possible. He knew it was possible. He had seen what the human fleet could do. "We could go to your homeworld," Jake continued. "We could bombard it until nothing living remained. We could pursue every colony, every outpost, every ship. We could make sure that in 100 years, nobody would even remember that the Vortak ever existed." Jake leaned forward. "And we could do it without even breaking a sweat. We could do it like swatting insects." The human's voice was matter of fact. No anger. No hatred. Just simple fact. Krax felt something he had never felt before. Real fear. Not the fear of battle, but the fear of facing someone who could end everything. Then Jake did something completely unexpected. He pressed a button on his armrest. The chains around Krax's wrists fell away. Krax stared at his free hands, confused. Was this a test? A trick? Why? Krax asked. Because, Jake said, standing up, that's not who we are anymore. He walked back to the viewport. Below them, the Zenari planet was beginning to recover. Human medical teams were already on the surface, helping the wounded. Human engineers were beginning to repair the destroyed cities. 400 years ago, Jake continued, my people were locked away. Not because we were peaceful, but because we were dangerous. Dangerous. Too violent. Too unpredictable. The galaxy looked at humanity and decided we were monsters that needed to be caged. He turned back to Krax. They were right. We were monsters. We still are in many ways. We evolved on a world that wanted to kill us. Every day was a fight for survival. We learned to be hunters. We learned to be warriors. We learned to never give up, never surrender, never stop pursuing what we wanted. Krax listened. The Galactic Assembly put us in a box, Jake said. They said, you stay here. You live in your 100 star systems. You never leave. In exchange, we'll leave you alone. You can do whatever you want, just not to anyone else. Jake's expression hardened. And for 400 years we did exactly that. We studied ourselves. We improved our weapons. We became even more dangerous. But we also became something else. What? Krax asked. Wise, Jake said simply. We learned that being strong doesn't mean you have to use your strength on everyone. We learned that the greatest power isn't in destruction. It's in restraint. In choosing not to destroy when you absolutely could. Jake moved closer to Krax. We learned mercy, Commander. And not the mercy of the weak. The mercy of the strong. When you're powerful enough to eliminate your enemies completely, and you choose not to, that's real strength. Krax didn't understand. Jake smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator that had decided to let you live. You're going to go home now, Jake said. You're going to take your remaining ships. You're going to tell your people what happened here. You're letting me go? Krax couldn't believe it. I'm more than letting you go, Jake said. I'm giving you a message. Tell your empire that humanity could have destroyed you. Tell them we had the power. Tell them we had every reason. But tell them we chose mercy instead. Jake walked back to his chair and sat down again. Tell them that if they ever attack a peaceful species again, if they ever cause this kind of suffering again, we won't be so philosophical about it. Tell them we will hunt them until there's nothing left. Tell them we will be patient. Tell them we will never stop. Krax stood up. His legs felt weak, but he stood anyway. Why are you doing this? He asked. Why show mercy to someone who would have shown you none? Jake's expression didn't change. Because, he said quietly, we're better than we were. And because someone needs to tell the galaxy what we learned. Someone needs to carry that message home. He gestured toward the door. Go. Your ship is fueled and ready. You can leave whenever you want. Krax turned and walked toward the door. His mind was spinning. He had come here as a conqueror. He was leaving as a messenger. He had come expecting death. He was leaving with his life. At the door he paused and looked back. Jake Morrison was still sitting in his chair, looking out at the viewport. At the recovering planet below. At the humans working to rebuild what the Vorthak had tried to destroy. Commander Morrison, Krax said. Jake turned to look at him. The galaxy has stories about humanity, Krax said. Stories about monsters. Stories about predators that should never be released. But I don't think those stories are about your strength. I think those stories are about your danger. Jake didn't respond. And now, Krax continued, I understand why. It's not because you kill everything. It's because you could kill everything and you don't. Krax left the room. Behind him he heard Jake's voice one more time. Go home, Commander. Tell them what you've learned. The galaxy needs to understand. We're very patient. And we never stop hunting. As Krax's ship jumped to fold space, leaving the Zenari system behind, he realized something. The Vorthak had been the hunters. They had hunted 43 civilizations across the galaxy. But they had just discovered what it felt like to be the prey. And the hunters? The hunters were patient. The hunters never got tired. The hunters never forgot. The hunters always came back. 3 days had passed since the battle ended. The Zenari planet was still healing. Smoke still rose from the cities. Rubble still filled the streets. But life was beginning again. Human medical teams worked around the clock, treating injured Zenari. Human engineers were already rebuilding the destroyed infrastructure. Human soldiers stood guard, making sure no more attacks would come. And the Zenari people, who had thought they were going to die, were slowly beginning to believe they might actually survive. High Coordinator Mira stood at the edge of the landing pad, watching the sunrise. The twin suns were coming up together, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It was beautiful. 3 days ago, she wasn't sure she would ever see another sunrise. She saw Commander Jake Morrison walking toward her. He was alone, which meant he wanted to talk privately. Myra's skin flickered with nervous patterns, but she stood still and waited. Jake stopped a few meters away. He was smaller than most of the Zenari, but there was something about him that made him seem larger. Something ancient and powerful. "High Coordinator," he said, bowing slightly. It was a human gesture of respect. "Commander," Mira replied. "I wanted to thank you. For everything. For coming. For saving us. For showing us that." Jake held up his hand gently. "Before you thank me, I want you to understand something. I want you to understand why we came." Mira waited. Jake looked out at the recovering colony. Human soldiers were handing out medical supplies to Zenari children. One young Zenari boy was laughing, actually laughing, as a human soldier showed him a picture on a portable computer screen. "We spent 400 years locked away," Jake said slowly. His voice was quiet, but there was emotion underneath it. 400 years in a quarantine zone. Isolated from the rest of the galaxy. Treated like prisoners. He turned to look at Mira directly. "Every single species we encountered, they feared us. They ran from us. They locked us away. They told their children stories about the dangerous humans. About the monsters that had to be caged. About the predators that could never be trusted." Mira listened. She could hear the pain in his voice. "The Galactic Assembly gave us a choice," Jake continued. "They said, you can live in your own space, do whatever you want there, but you can never leave. You can never expand. You can never be part of the greater galaxy. And for 400 years we accepted that. Because what choice did we have?" He gestured to the ruins around them. "Then your beacon activated. And something incredible happened. For the first time, in 400 years for the first time, a species didn't fear us. A species didn't run from us. A species didn't try to contain us. A species asked us for help." Jake's voice cracked slightly. "Do you understand what that meant to us? To be asked for help instead of feared? To be trusted instead of locked away?" Myra's crystalline skin began to glow softly. She understood. "The galaxy told stories about humanity," Jake said. "They said we were dangerous, violent, unpredictable, predators that should never be released. And it's all true. All of it. We are dangerous. We are predators. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day." He paused. "But what the galaxy forgot, what they never bothered to learn, is that we also learned something. Somewhere along the way, locked away on our world, we learned mercy. We learned that real strength isn't about how much you can destroy. Real strength is about choosing not to destroy when you have the absolute power to do so." Jake extended his hand. It was the human gesture of friendship and trust. An open hand. A hand holding no weapon. "Welcome to the new age of the galaxy," Jake said. "You activated that beacon. You freed humanity from 400 years of exile. And now, because of that, the galaxy has a choice. The galaxy can keep telling stories about monsters. Or the galaxy can learn the truth about what we've become." Mira looked at his hand for a moment. Then she reached out with one of her forearms and took it. The contact was warm. "Real. Honest. What will you do now?" Mira asked. "We'll stay here," Jake said. "For a while at least. We'll help you rebuild. We'll make sure the Vorthack don't come back. We'll show your people that humans aren't monsters. We're just something different." He smiled slightly. "And then we'll return to Earth. But things will be different now. The quarantine is over. Humanity is going to be part of the galaxy. And every species is going to have to decide, do we fear them or do we trust them?" Later that day, there was a formal ceremony in the ruins of the Zenari capital. The city had been destroyed by the Vorthack bombardment. But the Zenari had already begun rebuilding. The ceremony took place in an open square, surrounded by both Zenari and human soldiers. Mira stood before Jake with dozens of officials and soldiers witnessing. The ceremony was ancient, a formal greeting between two species that were now allies. "Why did you come?" Mira asked, speaking to Jake but loud enough for everyone to hear. It was a ritual question. "You had never met us. You owed us nothing. You had no reason to risk your people for us. Why? Jake took a moment before answering. He looked out at the recovering city. At the Zenari families standing together, watching. At the human soldiers working alongside Zenari engineers to clear debris and rebuild. Chancellor, he said using the formal title, we have a question we need to ask ourselves as a species. For 400 years we were isolated. We were feared. We were locked away. And we asked ourselves every day why. Why do they fear us so much? What is so dangerous about being human that the entire galaxy decided we needed to be contained? He paused. The answer is simple. We never stop. We never give up. We pursue what we want with complete dedication. We never surrender. We never accept defeat. That makes us dangerous to people who want to conquer us. But it also makes us dangerous to injustice. It makes us dangerous to tyranny. It makes us dangerous to anyone who wants to hurt the innocent. Jake turned to face Mira directly. We came because your beacon activated and we heard you asking for help. Not as conquerors. Not as subjects. But as equals asking for assistance. And when you asked, you showed us something the galaxy had forgotten. What? Mira asked. You showed us that we could be more than monsters, Jake said. You showed us that we could be heroes. That we could use our strength not to destroy but to protect. That the thing that makes us dangerous, our refusal to ever stop, could be used to protect the innocent instead of hunt them down. He extended his hand again. So we came because you needed us. But we stayed because you trusted us. And that trust has given humanity something we've been missing for 400 years. What's that? Mira asked. Purpose, Jake said simply. A reason to be more than just warriors. A reason to be protectors. As the sun set over the recovering colony, Jake stood at the landing pad with his officers. Their ships were prepared for departure. The immediate crisis was over. The Vorthak were gone. The Zenari were safe. But something had changed in the galaxy. Something fundamental. Captain Robert, Jake's weapons officer, stood beside him. What happens now, Commander? Now, Jake said looking up at the stars, we go home. We tell the Earth government that the quarantine is over. We tell them that humanity is going to be part of this galaxy. And we tell them that we're going to make sure what happened here never happens again. And if other species don't accept us? Robert asked. Jake smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile. Just a patient one. Then they'll learn, he said. We're very patient. And we never stop hunting. Above them, the stars began to shine as darkness fell. And somewhere out in space the news was spreading. The humans had been released. The monsters were free. But something unexpected had happened. The monsters had chosen to be heroes instead. A young Zenari child approached Jake before he left. Her name was Lily, and she was barely 3 years old. In Zenari years, that made her around 7 in human years. Commander Morrison, she said in her soft voice. Are you a monster? Jake knelt down to her level. His eyes were kind. Do I look like a monster? He asked. Lily shook her head. You look like a friend. Jake smiled. A real smile. Warm and genuine. Then I guess, he said, that's what I am. A friend. He stood up and walked toward his ship. Behind him, Mira watched as the human fleet prepared to depart. The galaxy would never be the same. For 400 years, the galaxy had told stories about the monsters locked away on Earth. Stories designed to frighten children. Stories designed to warn them about what happened when you became too dangerous. But the real story, the story that would echo through the galaxy for generations, was different. It was the story of monsters who learned to be heroes. It was the story of predators who chose mercy. It was the story of a species that could have conquered everything, but instead chose to protect. It was the story of humanity. And as Jake's flagship jumped to fold space, heading back toward Earth, he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never fear humanity again. The galaxy would learn to trust them instead. Because humanity had proven something that no other species in the galaxy understood. Real strength isn't about power. Real strength is about choosing mercy when you have the absolute power to destroy everything. And that, more than any weapon, was what made humanity the apex predators of the galaxy.